For the sake of my children. This is a love story about an Australian Christian girl who fell in love with a Saudi Muslim man, then converted to Islam, married her Arab lover, and traveled with him to the Islamic world. It was written in English and translated in Arabic by Dr. A. Ahmed. Copyright. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in the rival system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief paragraphs in a review to be printed in a newspaper, general journal, or a school magazine. All characters in this book are fictitious, and any resemblance to real people, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Chapter 11. Who are the real Muslims? Moderates or a terrorist? Her bitter experience in Saudi Arabia and her miserable life among the Mujahideen Afghanistan led the Australian wife to an amazing discovery that she thought no one had discovered before her. Irshad discovered that Islam is the only religion in the world that contains two contradictory messages that make it two religions in one. There is the first message of the Prophet Muhammad, which he preached when he was in the city of Mecca. And there is a second message he dictated when he was in the city of Medina. The first message appears to be peaceful and grants freedom of belief to non-Muslims. In Mecca, Muhammad did not impose an anti-woman teachings. During this period, the Prophet of Islam had one wife, Khadija bint Khuwaylid, and therefore he did not marry another wife. Polygamy was not yet legalized for the Muslim community in Mecca. Even jihad, which requires Muslims to spread Islam by the sword, was not legalized during that period. Muslims living in the West always refer to the life of the Prophet Muhammad and the teachings of the Quran in Mecca to prove that Islam is a religion of peace and believes in freedom of faith, and there was no compulsion in religion. In that period, the Quran granted all the infidels of Mecca the right to choose any religion they wished to follow, and the Jews and Christians were among the people of the heavenly books, and their religions are true religions from God. This period was 13 years. During that period, there were no hadiths taught to Muslims by the Prophet of Islam. Accordingly, the Quran at that time was the only source of the new religion. Today, followers of this seemingly peaceful message are often called moderate Muslims. The second Islam, or the second message of Muhammad, is completely different, strange, and contradictory to his first message. The second message denied freedom of belief. During this period, the Prophet Muhammad claimed that God had commanded him to kill anyone who refused to accept him as a messenger from God and refused to convert to Islam as a religion. In Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 1, book 2, hadith number 24, the Prophet Muhammad said, I have been commanded to fight all people until they testify that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is a messenger of God. And if they do so, they uphold from me their blood and their property. The meaning of non-compliance is that whoever refuses to testify or utter the Shahada or the two testimonies, I testify that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is a messenger of God. His wealth, wives, children, slaves, and blood are not reserved. Accordingly, the killing of these who rejected Islam is obligatory for every Muslim without exception. Muhammad's new message in Mecca city to all Arab tribes and the entire world was to accept Islam and be safe. Muhammad's new message in Medina city to all Arab tribes and the entire world was to accept Islam and be saved. Any tribe or individual who refuses this offer exposes himself to physical annihilation, and his wealth, wives, children, slaves, and livestock must be taken by the Mujahideen Muslims as booty. For the pagan Arab tribes, and later for the Hindus, Buddhists, and the whole world, the Quran said, then when the sacred months have passed, then kill the idolaters. Wherever you find them, disgrace them, and besiege them, and lay in wait for them in every ambush. If they establish prayer and bid zakat, so let them go their way. Indeed, Allah is forgiving, merciful. Surah Al-Tawbah 9, verse 5. This verse is known as the verse of the sword. They also call it the mother of abrogators. This single verse abrogated the legal force of the 124 verses of the Makkah Quran. Any previous verse that spoke of peace and freedom of faith has been superseded and rendered inapplicable by this single verse. Therefore, the violent message of Medina superseded the seemingly peaceful message of Mecca. Thus, Islam became obligatory for every non-Muslim. Every Muslim who leaves Islam kills as an apostate, whether he inherited Islam from his parents or was forced to accept it. He could leave it only on pain of death. For Jews and Christians, the Quran states, fight those who do not believe in God or the last day, who do not forbid what God and his messenger have forbidden, and who do not follow the religion of truth from God among those who have been given the book until they pay tribute out of hand while being humbled. Surah At-Tawbah 9, verse 29. So Islam demands complete submission from Jews and Christians. As defeated infidels who refused to convert to Islam, they should feel inferior to Muslims and should never be allowed to hold positions above Muslims. In addition, according to the Quran, Muslims are forbidden to be friends with Jews and Christians. The Quran says, O you who believe, do not take the Jews and Christians as allies. They are friends with each other. God does not guide the wrongdoing people. Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, verse 51. This verse means that the book of Islam, the Holy Quran, commanded all Muslims of the world to say, O you who have believed, do not take Jews and Christians as friends. They are each other's friends. And whoever takes them for friends is indeed one of them. That is, he becomes an unbeliever or an infidel like them. The Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace, said, He who does not fight the infidels or does not order the Muslim to do so will die as the polytheists of Mecca die in their disbelief. Again, the messenger said, Muslims were the best nation sent by God to people. They used to bring people with iron chains around their necks until they were forced to convert to Islam. Muhammad also said, Paradise is under the shadows of swords. And he said again, God sent me with the sword in my hands. So only God is worshipped and Muhammad is his messenger. Then the Prophet said, Whoever among you sees an evil, let him change it with his own hand. The Prophet Islam also commanded his followers by saying to them, Whoever changes his religion, kill him. The second period of Islam was 10 years. 99% of the Prophet Muhammad's negative teachings against women, haters, and misogynists were taught during this period. Suddenly, the woman became deficient in reason and religion, and the testimony of one man in court equals the testimony of two women. A daughter can inherit half of what her brother inherits from their father's money and property, and a man is allowed to marry 4 women at the same time. It is permissible for the husband to beat his disobedient wife, and divorce is in the hands of the man, and therefore he can divorce his wife with or without cause, while the woman cannot divorce her husband. Moreover, all other evil teachings against women, such as child marriage, female genital mutilation, polygamy, wife beating, and all other barbaric practices against women, were taught and permitted in the 10 years of Medina city. In this period, a new source of Islam called the Hadiths was introduced. When Muhammad was in Mecca city, the Quran was the only source of education. In Medina, the Prophet Islam taught 60,000 hadiths, all the anti-woman teachings, and most of the teachings of jihad and the killing of the so-called impure infidels and apostates are mentioned in the hadiths. The Quran contains 6,236 verses, while the hadiths are 60,000. Therefore, 75% of Sharia laws are based on the Sunnah and hadiths of the Prophet of Islam. If we include the so-called weak or doubtful hadiths, there are about 160,000 hadiths. The Prophet Muhammad forbade his followers to live in non-Muslim Muslim lands of the infidels. And in that he said, I'm innocent of the blood of any Muslim who lives among the infidels, that is the lands of the unbelievers. He said, I am innocent of the blood of any Muslim who lives among the polytheists. A Sudanese Islamic scholar, Dr. Abdul Hayy Yusuf, was asked, can a Muslim live in infidel countries such as America and Europe? He replied, it is not permissible for a Muslim man or a Muslim woman to live in infidel countries like America and Europe. He cited the 2 previous hadiths to support his answer. Accordingly, Muslims who live in Western countries such as America, Europe, Canada, and Australia are either hypocrites or are ignorant of the teachings of their Prophet Muhammad. The question that baffled the Australian wife Irshad is, who are the real Muslims? Followers of the first message from Mecca city or followers of the second message of Medina city? It is clear to her that the followers of the first message are the so-called moderate Muslims, while the followers of the second message are the radical Muslims, who are also called Islamic terrorists by other Muslims. By Muslim terrorists, she meant the notorious Islamic groups such as the Muslim Brotherhood, Al Qaeda, and the Taliban in Afghanistan, ISIS, or the Mujahideen of the Islamic Caliphate in Syria and Iraq, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Israel, Al Shabaab in Somalia, Lakshar Taiba in Pakistan, Al Aqsa Mosque brigades in Iraq, domestic terrorists in Western countries, Hazm Group, the armed faction of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, Muslim Sisters in the female branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Al-Khansa brigades are female jihadist fighters from ISIS, Boko Haram in Nigeria, the Janjaweed in Sudan, and many other Islamist groups. As a matter of fact, there are 86 Islamic terrorist groups in the world, but the ones mentioned above are the most evil. The million-dollar question for many non-Muslims in the West: who are the real Muslims, moderates or terrorists? After this initial stage of her doubt, the Australian wife Irshad was unable to answer this question. It appeared to her that both followers had legitimate and tangible evidence in their hands from the authentic Islamic teachings of the main divine texts, the Quran and the Blessed Sunnah, or the hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad. Therefore, the Western Muslim Irshad continued to follow Islam. She continued to perform the 5 daily prayers and fast during the months of Ramadan. Chapter 12. Love relationship is forbidden in Islam. During attending these women's gatherings in Afghanistan, the Australian woman Irshad became warm friend to a Canadian family. This family lived in Canada for a long time before returning to Afghanistan. For this reason, all family members speak English well. The family consists of two daughters, their father and their mother. The mother is known as Shahinaz. Her daughters are Shahrizad and Shadia, and her husband is Hassan. They were originally Afghani refugees in India who got resettled in Canada, and all of them obtained Canadian citizenship. The two daughters are 17 and 15 years old. The sisters, Shahrizad and Shadia, studied in Canada and therefore can read and write and are not illiterate like other Afghani girls. Despite this, after their parents brought them back to Afghanistan, they were unable to continue their education because the Taliban government closed all girls' schools. Life in the Mujahideen camps in Kandahar city for the two Canadian daughters is like living in a maximum security women's prison. When they were in Canada, they enjoyed many things that they would not find or be allowed to do in their new primitive society. When they were in Canada, their father was not very religious at that time and thus allowed them to socialize with their Canadian infidel friends and attend parties. They used to have big TV in their house. Each of the sisters had an iPad, an iPhone, and a laptop. After their father became a radical Muslim, or rather a true believer in the teachings of Islam, and took them to Afghanistan, they felt like they were back in the Stone Age or the 7th century Arab society at the time of the Prophet Muhammad. The Australian wife Irshad loves Shahinaz and her two daughters, and in a short time, they have become more than one family. She shared with them her bitter experience from the day she came to Saudi Arabia. She found that they shared the same aversions to the strict Islamic life in Afghanistan. They live in Afghanistan, the Mujahideen camps, against their will. The main problem faced by the two educated daughters of Shahinaz is finding suitable husbands among these uneducated Mujahideen. From the first day they came to Afghanistan 2 years ago, Shahinaz has resisted all marriage proposals that her husband Hassan brought to any of her two daughters. She knows she may not be able to resist forever. Sooner or later, she must marry her two daughters because it is a great shame in that Islamic society for a girl to remain unmarried after reaching the age of menstruation. In Afghanistan, a 20-year-old unmarried girl is considered too old to find a husband. Besides, there is always a great fear that her sexual desire for a man might force her to fall in love with him, commit adultery with him, bear an illegitimate child, and destroy her family. Whether this fear was based on truth or not, this is exactly what eventually happened to the eldest daughter of Shahinaz. The Canadian girl Shahrizad does not have the same backward Islamic mentality as her primitive Afghani society. She believes that a girl should be allowed to choose her life partner and that choice should come through love before marrying him. When the Australian girl Irshad was introduced to the Canadian family, Shahrizad already had a boyfriend. Her boyfriend is a handsome Arab boy from Syria. His parents recently moved from Damascus city to Kandahar city and joined the Mujahideen camps. Thus, he is a little enlightened compared to the other local boys in the camps. Arab Muslims have always consider themselves better than other non-Arab Muslims because of their knowledge of the Arabic language of the Quran. This superiority complex dates back to the time of the Prophet Muhammad and his four immediate Rashidun successors who ruled the Muhammadan state after his death. For example, the second caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab used to call non-Arab Muslims al-uluj, which means dirty or unclean slaves, even though they converted to Islam. With this mentality until the present time, the father of the Arab friend stood against the love relationship when he learned about the friendship between his Arab son and the Afghani daughter, uh, Shahrizad. However, the love affair between the Afghani sweetheart and her handsome Arab lover did not end. Both of them continued to meet each other under cover of night. Despite this, when Shahrizad's father learned of his daughter's love affair, he approached the father of the Syrian lover and demanded that they either marry the two at once or immediately end that shameful and forbidden relationship. Alas, the father of the Syrian boy turned down the offer of Shahridat's Afghani father and promised to persuade his Arab son to stop contacting the Afghani girl. Despite this promise, the Afghani father fears that his beautiful daughter will continue to meet the Syrian handsome youth and commit adultery with him and become pregnant with an illegitimate child. So, on the same day, the Afghani father conducted the marriage of his educated daughter with an uneducated Taliban boy in the mosque without her permission or consent. When Shahinaz learned that her daughter's marriage had been done to an uneducated Taliban boy, she quarreled with her husband Hassan and begged him to cancel the marriage contract. But her husband is stubborn man and stood firm in his decision. The mother is afraid that her daughter will kill herself when she finds out about her arranged marriage. To avoid such an eventuality, she went to her Australian friend and asked for her advice. Irshad told the Canadian mother that she must first inform her daughter of the marriage contract. Secondly, she must ask her Afghani daughter to inform her Syrian friend of her father's decision and her arranged marriage, which took place in the mosque without her consent. If the friend agrees to her plan to escape the predicament of an arranged marriage, the two lovers must escape from the Mujahideen camps and flee to a secular country like India and marry in accord there without the knowledge and consent of their Muslim parents. Then the newly married couple must claim asylum and then immigrate as persecuted refugees to a Western country and live there happily ever after. The Australian woman saw this way the problem of the two lovers can be solved and they can have a happy ending. But if the Australian wife had foreseen what her advice would do to that Canadian Afghani family, mother and her two daughters, she might never have advised them. Mother Shahinaz and her daughter Shahrizad followed the advice of the Australian wife Irshad step by step. As the Afghani mother expected, upon hearing the disturbing news of her arranged marriage to someone she did not love, who was uneducated and ignorant, the educated Canadian daughter threatened to commit suicide before the retarded Taliban man came to consummate his marriage to her. To avoid the suicidal death of one of her daughters, Shahinaz encouraged her daughter Shahrizad to call her Arab boyfriend and inform him of her forced arranged marriage, which took place without her consent. As the Australian wife expected, the Syrian boyfriend immediately agreed to elope with his Afghani girlfriend. The two lovers planned to elope during the night. With her mother's blessing, Shahrazad fled under cover of night with her Arab boyfriend. They eloped just 2 days after the arranged marriage took place at the mosque. The newlywed bride, Shah, Shahrazad, is supposed to be sent to her Afghani groom's tent a week after the marriage contract between her father and her guardian, Wali, and the illiterate Taliban boy as her husband was conducted and signed. Unfortunately, things did not turn out the way the Australian woman Irshad and the Canadian mother Shahrazad expected. The two lovers are captured by the armed night watchmen of the refugee camps as they flee under cover of the dark night. First, these armed guards had gang raped the beautiful virgin Canadian girl Shahrazad and beat her handsome Arab boyfriend with sticks and whips almost to death. Secondly, they brought them to the Mujahideen camps and testified falsely that they found them completely naked and having forbidden sex at night outside the camps. They swear by Almighty God by blessing their right hands on the Holy Quran and claim that more than four of them have seen with their own eyes the fully erect dick of the Arab boy was fully inserted inside the Afghani supposed hairy pussy, just like the mirwad in the mikhal, and fucking her as the male dog fucked its female doggy on the open place. The mullah who heard the accusation of adultery became angry and demanded that the adulterer and the adulteress be tried according to Islamic law. The other mullahs agreed to punish the married Afghani girl Shahrazad and her Syrian boyfriend according to God's book, the Holy Quran, and the blessed Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. Therefore, all the Mujahideen mullahs passed a collective judgment on the two adulterous lovers. According to their ruling, which they relied on in the book of God and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, the Syrian boy must be flogged 100 lashes for committed adultery with a woman who is not his lawful Muslim wife. As for the married Afghani girl, she was sentenced to death by stoning because she committed adultery with a man while she was married to another Muslim man. The Australian wife Irshad immediately collapsed when she heard about the decision of the camp's elders against the two innocent lovers. She held her advising the Afghani girlfriend to run away with her Syrian boyfriend. She knows she can never forgive herself for giving such erroneous advice to the two intimate lovers in that primitive and backward Islamic society. So she begged her Saudi husband to intervene and ask other Muslim men to join him in preventing these heartless mullahs from stoning the innocent girl Shahrazad. Mustafa responded by scolding Irshad. He told her as an honest and true Muslim, he could not stop God's judgment on those who deliberately cross his limits and the one who had an adulterous relationship with a married woman. When her Arab husband Mustafa refused to help, the Australian woman Irshad ventured out of her tent on her own and approached some of these mullahs in the training centers. She confesses to them that she is the one who gave the wrong advice to the Afghani lover and her Arab lover. The mullahs refused to change their rule and asked the Saudi husband to remove his foreign wife from the training camps. Mustafa apologized to the sheikhs and promised them that he would deal with his disobedient foreign wife. Accordingly, the Australian wife was mercilessly flogged by her Arab husband for disobedience and imprisoned in her tent until the day when the adulterous wife Shahrazad was stoned. It was only on that day her husband released her from her ropes and allowed her to witness the public execution of the adulterous Afghani girl. According to Islamic law, a married adulteress must be buried up to her neck in the ground and stoned by all Muslims. A so-called adulterous wife, Shahrazad, was brought to an open place in the middle of the tent to carry out God's judgment on her for transgressing his limits. Her hands and feet were tied and fixed with strong ropes. Every Muslim man was given as many stones as he could carry and throw. Even male children were given stones that day. Then some men dug a hole and buried Shahrazad up to her shoulders. Only her neck and head were visible to stone her to death and kill her. The Australian wife Ershad can forget all the evils, abuse, and violence she saw in the Islamic world committed against Muslim women and female children, but she cannot erase from her memory the brutal and inhuman punishment that innocent Afghani girl was unjustly subjected to. She cannot forget Shahrazad's dying screams when those stones began to fall like swarm of locusts or a hail of bullets on her beautiful face. Like bullets fired at close range, her white face was disfigured, her long black hair was cut off, and her head was smashed like hit by swords and spears. Within minutes, blood covered her body. Her head was smashed, and her long hair was cut from it. The Western girl Irshad did all she could in those desperate moments, but she could not prevent these ruthless Muslim barbarians from performing their religious duty. Before the innocent Afghani girl Shahrazad breathed her last, the Australian wife Irshad fell to her knees and passed out. The memory of that fateful day continues to haunt the Australian wife throughout her life. Stoning the innocent girl Shahrazad has direct consequences for her Canadian family as well. On the same day, when she was brutally executed by these savages, her sister Shadia poured kerosene on her body and set herself on fire. She died before they could take her to the hospital. The Afghani Canadian mother Shahinaz could not bear the horrors of the brutal execution of her daughter Shahrazad and the suicidal death of her daughter Shadia and became a mad woman. The Syrian lover managed to survive 100 lashes on his bare back, but he became disabled and was confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. When the Australian wife Irshad learned of what happened to the Canadian Afghani mother Shahinaz and her two daughters, Shahrazad, Shadia, and the Arab boyfriend, she held herself responsible for all the evils that befell them because of the accident and her wrong advice. She understood that she could not forgive herself for the rest of her life. Chapter 13, Jannat Firdos Martha. 5 years pass while the horribly abused Australian wife stays against her will in the Mujahideen camps in Afghanistan. She went through hundreds of violations and saw with her own eyes the countless horrifying tortures that Muslim women, old and young, are subjected to. If anyone were to tell her what she had experienced or witnessed happening to other Muslim females, in the Islamic world, while in Australia, she would not have believed it. She witnessed wives brutally beaten by angry husbands, daughters killed in honor killings, female genital mutilation of Muslim children, and many young women stoned to death by angry mobs. During those 5 years, the memory of the brutal murder of the late innocent Canadian girl did not leave her vision for a moment. Often, while she slept, she had horrific nightmares and woke up in the middle of the night and began to weep bitterly for Shahrazad, who was stoned to death, her sister Shadia, who was burned alive, and their mother Shahinaz, who was became a lunatic woman. Every day and night, the Australian wife regrets that she advised the Canadian mother Shahinaz to encourage her Afghani daughter Shahrazad to escape with her Syrian lover. Irshad knew that the only relief for her was to escape from those hellish camps to a place where there was nothing to remind her of that black day when the innocent Canadian girl was buried under a pile of stones and bricks. No matter what may happen to her, the Australian mother is determined not to leave her children in the Islamic world and flee to the Western world. In her heart, however, she hoped that one day she would be able to escape with her children and return to her native land, Australia. Albeit, this hope seemed impossible for her to fulfill without divine intervention. When the Australian Irshad and her Saudi husband When the Australian wife Irshad and her Saudi husband Mustafa came to Afghanistan, they had 4 children. In the first 3 years of their stay in Kandahar city, they had 3 more children. Meanwhile, her husband was trained in many military tactics of the terrorist groups of Al Qaeda and Taliban. In a short period, he became one of the most trusted mujahideen. He was dispatched on many missions and carried out jihad war for the sake of God in many countries of the Middle East, many countries in the Middle East and North Africa. 3 years later, he was sent on a 2 year mission. During this long period, whenever his Australian wife Irshad inquired about her Saudi husband Mustafa, she was told that he was alive and doing God's work in some Muslim countries. When she insisted on knowing the whereabouts of her Saudi husband, the Australian wife learned that her brave Arab man was training young mujahideen in some Arab and African countries. She was also told that neither woman nor children would be allowed in those dangerous training areas. During this long period of his absence, the Australian wife never received a letter from her Saudi husband. Therefore, his exact whereabouts remained a hidden mystery to her. However, this mystery did not last forever. One day, one of the Afghani mullahs, the Amir or the prince leader of her husband, came to her tent with a happy smile on his bearded face and conveyed to her the so called good news. He shouted out, God is great, or Allahu Akbar 3 times, and praised the Prophet Muhammad twice before informing her of the suicide death of her brave Saudi husband Mustafa Shammari as a martyr to God in New York City, USA. And he soon added that her brave Arab man is now in paradise, enjoyed himself by fucking his 72 virgins and breaking their hymens while drinking from the tasty rivers of wine, milk, and honey in paradise. Upon hearing the sad news, the Australian widow Irshad fell on her knees and wept bitterly for a long time. In fact, she mourned for her 7 orphan children instead of grieving the so-called martyrdom of her brave Arab man. The Australian wife has always expected that one day her Saudi husband will blow his body to smithereens for God's sake. He told her several times that he was going on a dangerous mission and might sacrifice his life for the sake of jihad in the way of Allah against the ritually unclean infidels, but he came back alive again and again. All of these missions did not last more than a few weeks or a few months. For reasons unknown to her at that time, her Saudi husband's last jihadi mission lasted more than 2 years. During that long period, the Australian wife was left alone to take care of her 7 young children. Fortunately, the Mujahideen and their families in the camps are provided with free food and clothing. In addition, families receive some cash for their other needs. Even the most married widows who have no surviving husbands are entitled to financial support from the Islamic treasury of the Mujahideen camps, which is called Beit al Mal. Meanwhile, the Australian mother always yearns to escape those concentration camps, which are like death camps. She does not want her children to grow up in that abusive, primitive society. What a pity! There is no way out for her and her children. She knows as long as her husband is alive, she can never dream of escaping from the camps without being caught and brought back. She knew and understood that the punishment for a married fugitive wife or a widow would be harsh. Irshad remembered that innocent Canadian girl Shahrizad, who was caught by some armed Mujahideen night guards as she was escaping from the camps with her Syrian lover. Irshad recalls that the Afghani girlfriend was first gang raped by these armed guards and later stoned to death for the alleged crime of adultery and her escape from her legal Muslim husband with her Syrian boyfriend. Therefore, the Australian widow did not take such a serious step. Besides, she does not want to leave her 7 children and flee alone to her homeland. She has decided without her kids, she is not going anywhere. Despite this, after the so-called martyrdom of her late Saudi husband, Mustafa, the Australian widow Irshad believed that she would be allowed to go with her 7 children to her native country, Australia. Therefore, a few days after she heard the news of the martyrdom of her brave Arab husband, the Australian widow approached the Amir himself, who informed her of his heroic martyrdom in jihad for the sake of God, of her husband's heroic martyrdom in jihad for the sake of God. Then she revealed to him her plan to return to her native land, Australia, with her 7 children. Before responding to her request, Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid took out a letter from his bag and handed it to her and asked her to read it out loud. The letter is written in plain English. Irshad read the letter with a trembling body and sweaty hands, while her heart beat loudly like an African drum. The official letter was written and signed by her Saudi husband, the brave martyr, and the Muslim hero martyr Mustafa al-Shammari. He mentioned in the letter that he has no objection if his foreign wife, Irshad, decides to go back to her country of origin, Australia, after his martyrdom in the jihad war against the American infidels who are Satan worshippers. But she should not be allowed to take one of his 7 Muslim children with her to the land of infidels. And his 7 righteous sons and daughters must be a responsibility on the neck of the Amir, the venerable Sheikh Muhammad Abu Hamid. May God bless him. The blessed Mullah must raise his Muslim children in Afghanistan, Moreover, his Australian wife should not be allowed to take his 7 children and travel with them anywhere outside the Mujahideen camps in Afghanistan, including his native country, Saudi Arabia, in case she wishes to perform Hajj rituals. But if his Australian widow, Irshad, decides to continue living in the Mujahideen camps in Kandahar city among the true Muslims, she must be helped to find a devout Muslim man and marry him as her second husband. No matter how much the foreign widow Irshad begged and wept in front of Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, all her words and tears were in vain, as if they were water poured on a stone heart. The Venerable Prince Sheikh Abu Hamid explained to her that her husband, the late hero Marta Mustafa Shamari, who now lives in Jannat al Firdaus with 72 virgins, does not want his Muslim children to grow up among the infidels. He said that in Australia, the 7 Muslim children of the Galan Mata Mustafa will be surrounded by drugs, alcohol, nudity, immoral and forbidden relationships between men and women, unmarried adulterers, gays, lesbians, sodomy, naked and half-closet prostitutes, and others immoral, evil practices of the religiously and ritually unclean infidels, while they live in their abhorrent state of disbelief and blasphemy. As a result, the Australian widow Irshad decided, despite her desire to escape, to sacrifice her life for the sake of her 7 children and remain in those infernal camps of Muslim Mujahideen. But the real problem for the beautiful white foreign widow Irshad began after she completed her waiting period after the death of her Arab husband, which is called Fatratul Iddah. According to Sharia, a married Muslim woman whose husband has divorced her or died and left her a widow may not marry another man until she has completed 3 months and 10 days. Irshad was surprised one day when she saw the old Sheikh Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid entering her tent with 4 Mujahideen men, all of them bearded like him. Then the Amir of her late husband told her that since she had completed the months of waiting period of Iddah, she must marry another Muslim man or leave the camps. Moreover, the Venerable Sheikh suggested that he marry her himself if she decided to continue living among the Mujahideen, who are the only true Muslims in the world, because they are following the correct teachings of God's book, the Holy Quran, and the hadiths of the blessed Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, upon him be the best praise and peace of Allah. The Australian widow, Irshad, politely declines his marriage proposal and tells him that she can leave the camps with her 7 children. Mullah Abu Hamid told her that she could not be allowed to take the 7 Muslim children and travel to the land of the infidels. He gave her 1 week to make her final decision. Moreover, the Afghani mullah reminded the Australian widow of her late husband's letter in which he mentioned not to take his 7 children outside the Islamic land of Afghanistan. In this case, after 1 week, the Australian woman came and told Mullah Abu Hamid that she preferred to return to her country alone and leave her 7 children under his care as their legal guardian. When Irshad says that she will leave alone, she has a secret plan in her mind. She wants to travel alone to Pakistan and go to the Australian embassy in Islamabad city. She expected the embassy to issue passports, visas, and free airline tickets for her and her 7 children, and then help her obtain custody of them from Mullah Abu Hamid. When the Australian widow Irshad received permission from the Afghani Amir Abu Hamid, she traveled alone from the Mujahideen camps to the Afghani-Pakistani border by truck. During her dangerous journey, she is constantly subjected to sexual and immoral harassment by male messengers. Male's messenger. Even the truck driver tried to rape her, but she had a fight with him and scolded him in front of all the other passengers. Then she traveled from the border by train to the Pakistani capital city, Islamabad. The Australian widow Irshad Shammari decided to be honest and tell the embassy everything about her bitter experience in Saudi Arabia and her miserable life in the Mujahideen camps in Afghanistan with her 7 children. Unfortunately, the honesty worked against her, and thus her application was rejected due to her association with Muslim terrorists for many years. Irshad pleaded her, her rejected case and claimed her innocence and tried to convince the Australian embassy officials that she was not involved in any terrorist activities and that she herself was a victim of Islamic terrorism. In her appeal, she stated that she was kept captive and imprisoned in those Mujahideen camps against her will. Despite her pleas and tears, the Australian embassy again dismissed her case as they did to her in Riyadh City in Saudi Arabia. When her request was rejected and all doors were closed in her face, the Australian widow Irshad decided to return to Afghanistan and marry the old Afghani man, Prince Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, who is 40 years older than her. The Australian widow was 30 years old at the time, and the old sheikh was nearly 70 years old. Everything the white mother Irshad did and decided to do was for the sake of her 7 innocent children. She was determined to endure all kinds of abuse and torture for their sake. Chapter 14. Abduction of the White Wife. On her way back, the beautiful and sexy young Australian widow Irshad Shammari is subjected to the same sexual harassment that she had been subjected to before on her flight from Kandahar to Islamabad. This time, when she reached her final destination, her problem went beyond her male sexual harassment and put her life in real danger. The truck that took her from a small town on the Pakistani border to Kandahar arrived late arrived late in the city. It drove her far away from where the camps are located. When the slow truck arrived downtown, it was already 12:30 midnight. At that late hour of the night, there was no bus, taxi, or other means of transport to take her to the Mujahideen camps. All the passengers disembarked from the lorry and dispersed in different directions, walking on foot to their places. The Australian widow happens to be the lone female passenger in the truck. She is afraid to venture alone and walk at night to the Mujahideen camps. She needs to walk at She needs to work for at least 2 hours to reach her tent. On the other hand, she dreads spending the night inside the truck with the driver and his co-driver. She expected that these two lustful Afghani men would not hesitate to gang rape her by simply living alone with them at night in their lorry. For them, it will be a sexual catch as easy as catching a fish in a water barrel. Then they will then they will kill her and take her dead body in their truck and dump it in a ditch somewhere outside the city. To avoid such mass rape and brutal deaths, the white woman gathered her courage and started walking alone to where the Mujahideen camps. As she walked, the Australian widow Irshad felt a little confident when she remembered that she was carrying a pistol loaded with live ammunition inside her handbag. It was given to her by her late Saudi husband Mustafa, expected some Afghani night guards to try to come to his tent and rape his beautiful foreign wife while he was away. He knew that some of these Afghani men thought every white woman is a whore who could go with any man he wanted her in his bed. The Arab husband knew in his country, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, a married woman or an unmarried girl would be raped inside an elevator if she dared to step alone out of her apartment. There is a belief in that male dominated country. If a woman put one foot out of her door while her other foot is still inside her house, she would be raped. Wherefore, the Saudi husband gave his young, beautiful Australian wife the gun and told her to use it if any armed Afghani guard attacked her inside her tent at night when he was not with her. While advancing towards her final destination, Irshad realized that the road she is supposed to be heading to has no lights and therefore is very dark. At first, she hesitated to enter that dark place alone. Standing in the middle of the night in that place also carries great danger. Irshad knew that if the Afghani policemen found her there, they would gang rape her and then throw her into their prison. The next day, they would flog her 53 lashes for walking around alone without her husband or a male relative called Muhram accompanying her. To avoid such a possibility, Irshad entered the deserted dark path and started to walk. She can hardly see anything in front of her because of the pitch dark, black dark night. She was walking. As she was walking, Irshad suddenly felt someone's hand come behind her and cover her mouth, and another hand grabbed her waist. She felt as if invisible beings had come out of nowhere and assaulted her. She tried to scream, but she couldn't. She tried to free her body from the grip of the two hands, but she could not do that either. Then she felt herself being lifted off the ground and being carried away by some unseen creatures. All of these movements happened in less than a minute. When Irshad got over the shock, she realized that she had been kidnapped and carried by two people, one holding her upper body, covering her mouth, and the other holding her legs. They hid their faces with turbans. They ran as fast as they can while carrying her. Then the kidnappers stopped and put her body on a donkey. One of them climbed onto the donkey and continued to hold her body with one hand while covering her mouth with his other hand. The other one released the donkey and also jumped on its back. The kidnappers kept her sandwiched between them on the back of their donkey and drove away. The widow Irshad could not free her hands from their grip to open her handbag and use the loaded pistol given to her by her late husband Mustafa. On that fateful night, the kidnappers took the beautiful and sexy white woman from Kandahar city to a nearby mountain in a small village. Not only do they intended to gang rape her, but if possible to keep her for a longer period of time to abuse her again and again, as they have done to other girls they have abducted before. It so happened that there was a dome of a mausoleum of a Muslim holy man who was considered one of the saints of God in Afghanistan and had passed away many years ago. The shrine is located on top of a mountain. The two kidnappers knew that the sacred dome was their sanctuary to imprison their female victims. Who would think that anyone could use this sacred place to rape and imprison a girl, a young woman, or a minor female child? The villagers consider the shrine to be the dome of the guardian saint of God on earth, who still sends blessing to them even after his departure from the land of the living and descending to the land of the dead many years ago. Every Friday evening, many women from that village visit the shrine to seek help or to seek blessings from the good man of God. If a woman gives birth to a child, she must take him to the shrine to be blessed. If she loves, if she loses something valuable, she will go there and ask the buried guardian of Allah on earth to return it to her and punish those who stole it from her. If a member of a family gets sick or falls into a serious car accident and his life is suspended between heaven and earth, his female relatives must go to this righteous guardian and ask him to save his or her life. A barren woman who could not bear children would visit the shrine every Friday evening until one day the dead guardian would perform a miracle and bless her with a child. If in some way such a barren woman becomes pregnant and in time gives birth to a child, she shall call every person in the village and slaughter a cow or a sheep or a camel. Then all the guests will gather near the shrine and eat the food of dignity or krama. Therefore, the simple villagers consider this shrine as sacred as the Black Kaaba in the holy city of Mecca or the tomb of the Prophet Muhammad in Medina city. That night, the two evil men brought the beautiful white woman Irshad to the shrine not to bless her or cure her of a serious illness, but to be gang raped and imprisoned for a long time. They tied her hands and legs with ropes and closed her mouth with a long piece of turban. The Australian widow has concluded her days are over. She expected her captors to rape her and then kill her to hide their heinous crime. The two kidnappers opened the door of the small shrine and dragged the kidnapped foreign girl inside. No one had ever dared to break down or enter the door of that holy tomb. There is an old guard employed by the village chief to take care of the shrine. The simple, the simple villagers consider him a good man of Allah and a living saint as well. His duty is to collect the money of the people of the village offered by the visitors. And once a month, he must open the door of the shrine and go inside to clean the holy tomb. Many villagers believe that if anyone else dares to open the door and enter the sacred area, he will either turn into a stone idol or contract bad diseases such as leprosy, cancer, or coronavirus. When the new victim, Irshad, was dragged inside, she was so frightened by the darkness of the place. One of them lit a small candle and placed it on the ground. Irshad saw the two men standing in front of her like black demons. They still covered their faces with black turbans. She could hear their breathing like the hot steam of a freight train engine coming out of their big nostrils like breathing dragons. They had not yet spoken to her or to each other. Then one of the kidnappers whispered to the other, "Let us take her clothes off first. Do not remove the turban from her mouth. If we free her mouth, she may scream and awaken the righteous disciple that acts as a sentinel. At least let us untie the ropes from her hands and feet. We cannot fuck her pussy or her ass while she is tied up like this." Although the two men spoke those dirty words in whispers, the white widow Irshad heard them clearly due to the stillness of the night. The shrine is so quiet that one can hear a pin drop. The two men first untied the binding ropes, then freed her legs and hands. Once released, the white woman tried to stand up and fight against her captors. She could not stand due to their masculine physical strength surpassing her feminine ability. She was slapped and kicked by both of them. Then they forced her to kneel on the ground. While the two men were holding her to the ground, she continued to shake her body and struggle and fight them. Irshad became like a wild cat fighting with two voracious dogs. She scratched their faces with her nails and beat their hands with her teeth. Meanwhile, her legs continued to kick their bodies hard as stones. When the kidnappers realized the difficulty of dealing with a white woman while her hands and feet were free, they decided to tie her with ropes again. One of them kept pressing her to the ground while the other searched for the ropes. The, the kidnapped foreign woman somehow managed to get away from that man and crept towards the door. The man jumped on her back and forced her to the ground. She managed to escape from him again and took off the turban covering her mouth. At that critical moment, her frightened eyes noticed her handbag lying on the ground within her reach. She reached, she reached out her right hand and took it. The man tried to take her handbag, but he couldn't. Irshad quickly opened her handbag and took out the revolver, which was full of live bullets. Immediately, a shot was fired at whoever was trying to catch her, but the bullet missed him. The powerful sound of the shot causes the first man to fall to the ground and the other to stand up while trembling like a decrepit old geezer. The Australian woman pointed her gun at the standing man and shouted, "Get out of here, or I will kill you." The man fled from the shrine at once. As for the other Afghani, he remained lying on the ground, begging the white woman to forgive him for his sin and save his life for the sake of God. If you if you feared God, you wouldn't have kidnapped me and tried to rape me, you and the other coward. The man shouted again, "Please, my merciful lady, do not kill me. Get out of here before I put my gun to your head and exploded it." The evil Afghani man immediately got to his feet and ran outside the shrine. As soon as he got out, he pulled the door from the outside and locked it. The Australian woman Irshad realized her mistake too late. She ran to the door but discovered that it was locked from the outside. The foreign woman shouted angrily, "Open the door before I shoot and break it." When she said those words, she heard the kidnappers' footsteps running away. Meanwhile, the powerful sound of the revolver woke the old man guarding the holy shrine. He woke up terrified and very afraid. His extreme fear made him fall out of his bed. Since the day he was assigned to guard the shrine many years ago, the righteous disciple had never expected to hear such a powerful explosion. He became very terrified and saw that some dangerous Muslim terrorists came from the Mujahideen camps in Afghanistan City, blown up the shrine of the dome of the holy place. He got to his feet and fled out of his little hut. He came out as if the flames of a blazing wildfire were chasing him. At that moment, the righteous guard saw the two captors coming down at full speed from the high mountain. His suspicion was confirmed when he saw the two men running away at an incredible speed. He concludes that they are among the Muslim terrorists who caused the explosion. He says that a said person, a suicide terrorist, had blown his body into bits and pieces in jihad for the sake of God and to avoid being shot and killed by the fleeing terrorist. He turned into the opposite direction and started fleeing for his life as well. He just happens to be hunchbacked, crippled old man. So he stumbled twice and fell, but he didn't stop. He crawled on his knees until he could not move. In spite of his physical inability to move, the holy disciple began to roll his body around him and circle him until he reached the foot of the mountain. When the righteous old guard somehow managed to get under the sacred mountain, his body became very damaged and had many bruises. With great difficulty, the holy man of God rose to his feet and continued his escape. Since that day, no one has seen that good shepherd of the holy shrine again. Not only did he escape from the holy shrine mountain, but he also escaped from the village and returned to Kandahar city and became a beggar on the streets. The righteous disciple chose to beg, starve to death, and live like a stray, manipulated rabid dog or a sick, all abandoned donkey rather than being blown to bits and pieces by dangerous Muslim mujahideen who don't believe in creating shrines for the dead saints. Chapter 15: Pilgrimage of Muslim Women to the Holy Mountain. The night the two evil men kidnapped the foreign woman Irshad was thirsty. The imprisoned Australian widow tried her best to open the door of the small shrine, but she was unsuccessful. She screamed for help, but no one heard her. Finally, Irshad gave up hope and waited for help from God. A white tomb blessing in one corner of the little hut made her understood that she was locked inside a dead person's grave. She also knew that the tomb is located on top of a mountain. It is far from the city. However, all this information could not help her figure out how to save herself. The kidnapped Australian woman was kept locked up in that shrine for the next night and half of the day. In the morning, she expected that these two evil Afghani men would come again to attack her and try to rape her. However, she rejected that possibility when she recalled how her cowardly captors had been frightened by her when she pulled out her revolver, fired a shot at one of them, and threatened to kill them both. By late afternoon that day, the women of the village began preparing for their weekly Friday pilgrimage to their holy shrine. Since, since women in Islam are not allowed to participate in the public Friday prayer in the village only mosque, which is reserved for men only, they like to go to the holy mountain and offer their petitions and supplications to God's righteous dead guardian on earth. This is because the Prophet Muhammad prohibited women from praying in mosques and asked them to pray in their homes. By 3 o'clock that Friday, each woman had begun to leave her house and join other women on their way to the shrine of Wali Allah Salih. They all wear white gowns and hide their faces with their Islamic headscarves. They all donned burqas and hid their faces, hands, and legs and look like spooky white female ghosts or vampires in horror movies or a spooky Halloween or wore spooky Halloween costumes. Hundreds of them walk along the village road leading to the holy mountain where the shrine of God's righteous saint who passed away hundreds of years ago is located. This shrine has become a part of their lives. It has been there since time immemorial. Every woman has visited this shrine many times before. From the first day when the girl was born, her mother took her to that holy shrine to be blessed. When she grows up, she should go every Friday to the blessed shrine and ask the dead guardian of Allah on earth to give her a good husband. And when she gets married, she should go in search of a blessed child. When the child is born to her, she must go and present him to the honor of the holy shrine. If the child happens to be a boy, she should visit frequently and pray that her son will grow up as a good man and help his parents. If it turns out that the baby is a girl child, then she should ask the man of God to preserve her pussy as a virgin and not allow her to bring about a sexual scandal to her family until she finds a good husband. And when she gets married, she must follow her mother's example and repeat this circle of life over and over again and forever. By 5 o'clock that Friday, the first group of women had reached the foot of the holy mountain, nor shall they begin their ascent until all the women have been there. Arriving at the foot of the mountain, the women felt as if they had arrived at the sacred Mount Arafat in Saudi Arabia. When all the women had reached the foot of the mountain of God, the village chief's wife announced the start of the ascent to the blessed sanctuary. Each woman, each woman fell silent and began to silently climb God's mountain. Young unmarried girls are not allowed to lead the boarding. All the women should go first, with middle-aged women to follow. Behind them follow teenage girls, and then minor girls who have not yet had their monthly menstruation due to their young age. Adolescent girls and unmarried young women should follow these minor girls because they are not yet defiled by menstrual blood. The menstruating girl at the time of ascent is not allowed to rise up to the top, but she must remain at the foot of the holy mountain and wait for her mother or sister to bring her the blessed sands from the shrine of the saint of the God of God on earth. This menstruating this menstruating girl is considered unclean, and hence under no circumstances is she allowed to walk the holy path and ascend to the blessed shrine. If she defies these divine restrictions and venture into the holy mountain and brings her menstruation in her pussy and underwear to the shrine of the righteous man of God, she will put herself under a great curse and be cursed because she has defiled a holy place. All the villagers believe that such a girl will become barren and will not have a child in her life, even if she marries 10 men. Even worse, such a damsel might conceive of an illegitimate child before marriage and bring great disgrace to her family, and thus be killed out of honor by her father or brother. It is possible to climb the sacred mountain and ascend to the sanctuary by one narrow road. This road has no runways. Only one woman can walk in it, and the others follow her steps one by one like a long moving line or a female soldier in a military parade. As soon as the first woman extends her right foot and begins to ascend, she should begin loudly breathing the dead saint. The second lady should do the same, and so on until the last. Each woman is supposed to raise her right hand and start breathing her holy saint. As they climb up, the woman's cries can be heard like those of pilgrims circling the Holy Kaaba and the Black Stone in Mecca city, running from Al Safa Hill to Al Marwa Hill, and standing soberly at the Holy Mountain in the city of Arafat in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The village chief's wife leads a long line of women. Because of her age, the queue moves slowly like a group of turtles climbing the blessed mountain. To proceed with the events of that Friday evening, let us skip the unnecessary delays caused by the village chief's wife on account of her advanced age and incurable chronic illness and go straight to the sanctuary. By the time all of the women had somehow managed to reach the sacred mountain, the shrieking of their voices could seriously damage the ear of someone unaccustomed to such kind of loud noises. The kidnapped foreign widow and imprisoned Australian woman Irshad resurrected out of a deep calmness that gripped her soul all night and all day. She felt as if she had been buried in a grave, and some woman came to visit her tomb and honor her as a Muslim saint or a good guardian of God on earth. And because she was born a woman, expecting her to be treated like a Muslim saint in an Islamic society is next to impossible. Such a wish will never come true. Only men in this part of the world can be considered saints or righteous guardians of God on earth who have no fear nor they grieve. And when they die, people visit their graves and seek blessings from their shrines. As far as my knowledge is concerned, I have never heard, and I believe I will never hear in the future of a Muslim woman who became a righteous guardian of Allah on earth or a saint after her death and had people visit her shrine after she passed away in a Muslim community, no matter how revered and biased she was in her earthly life. In fact, in Islamic culture, a woman considers her birth a curse on her parents, her life a danger to the honor of her family, and her maintenance after her marriage is a burden on her husband. But her early days in her youth is a huge relief to everyone in her family. At first, the white woman Irshad thought her rescuers had come, but the woman's screams took away hope from her heart. She concluded that no matter how much she screamed and asked for help, her gentle female voice could not be heard due to the loud, deafening woman's voices. Her chance of being heard and rescued became slim when all the pilgrims arrived at the holy shrine and began offering their petitions and supplications to the righteous guardian of God on earth. Ershad repeatedly called for help, banging her hands and kicking her feet on the solid iron door of the tomb. She wants to tell them that the saint they worship can hear their prayers and accept their petitions if they free her from the tomb of his holy shrine. The imprisoned Australian woman feared that the woman would end their visit and leave without knowing that she was imprisoned inside with their saint, the righteous guardian of God, who died before the end of ages. An idea came to her mind, but she resisted it and continued her fruitless efforts to draw the attention of female worshippers, pilgrims, penitents, bias worshippers, memorizer of the unseen, and visitors to the mountain of God's righteous guardian, Makashabi. May God honor his grave. By then, these female pilgrims had reached the pinnacle of their worship. Some women cry, some laugh, some ululate, and most of them make strange, funny, and frightening sounds that cannot be determined whether they are the voices of animals, demons, angels, or of virgins, nymphs who descended from paradise, which is in the zodiac sky. Some women went so far as to fall in front of the holy shrine and roll over and over in the dirt like people suffering from epileptic seizures. During this great spiritual holy rapture, the imprisoned Australian widow finally made up her mind and fired 3 live shots from her revolver. It is not only difficult but impossible to describe the chaos that prevailed and changed that sacred spiritual atmosphere. It would have been more than enough if the armed white foreign lady had fired her gun just once. If a single shot from such a powerful revolver caused 2 men to run at the speed of light and a lame hunch back it all man to roll all the way from the top of the mountain to the foot of the mountain. What could we expect to happen to these village women when they hear the sound of gunshots thundering 3 times? Some women fainted immediately and stopped breathing. Many other women have had major heart attacks. However, large numbers of married women, elderly women, and others in the midst fled in search of shelter and hide out but could not find any, and thus used their fellow worshippers or their young and teenage daughters as human shields. A few women turned into normies and their brains stopped working. They became like dead bodies. Some teenagers and non menstruating girls somehow managed to escape for their lives, leaving behind their mothers, aunts, grandmothers, friends, relatives, and neighbors to face their deaths at the hands of Muslim terrorists armed to the teeth. The terror and panic caused by the gunshots from the prisoner Irshad is indescribable. After that, a complete silence followed, and one could hear a needle fall. The kidnapped white woman who was imprisoned inside the blessed shrine shook her head several times to make sure she was not dreaming or hallucinating. She put her ear to the iron door to make sure that those righteous, devout, penitent women visiting the holy shrine of the righteous guardian of Allah on earth were still there. When she could not when she could hear no sound, she concluded that her powerful shots killed all the women in front of the shrine door due to fear. To confirm or refute this unpleasant end to that sacred cult worship of the pious woman of God, the brave white woman decided to try her luck again and ask for help. Is there any female visitors to the tomb of this shrine of the man of God who is still dead? The kidnapped Australian widow cried out these words from within the darkened tomb. The great terror caused by the gunshots turned it into extreme panic when some of the hiding women hear a soft female voice, sweet as the song of a nightingale, calling from inside the tomb of the long dead guardian of God on earth, Melchizedek. Did God make such a great miracle by reviving his good guardian? If yes, why did he bring him back to life as a woman? How can a woman be a holy man of God? According to Sharia, a woman may not be an imama, a lead man in prayer, or be a caliph, and rule a country. So why did God Almighty do such an abomination by turning his dead, pure, and holy saint into an unclean creature like a gale? This is the sort that goes on in the minds of some frightened, hidden women who are still alive and whose brains are still working. Please help me. Irshad screamed again in her sweet, musical, and angelic voice. Indeed, at that terrible time, this terrified woman needed more help than her. They were now motionless and their bodies paralyzed, frozen, and stiff. My name is Irshad Shammari. I am a widow from the Mujahideen camps in Kandahar city. Could you please help me? An old-hag woman who was less afraid than the other frightened ladies heard some words of Irshad's last sentence, but interpreted them in some miraculous way. She saw that the dead righteous man of God had answered her prayer and sent an angel to confirm it. But she is hesitant to move her sedated body. When no woman answered her words, the kidnapped and imprisoned foreign widow decided to slam the door with her hands and kick it again with her shoes. She did it with all her might. Another old hag woman heard the kicking and beating, but she fears that the holy man will rise from his grave and come out to punish her for her disobedience to her late husband, Sheikh Isa Musa, who died recently at the age of 88. However, with fear and trembling, she said, I hear you, holy man of God. If you hear me, can you open the door, please? Two evil men kidnapped me from the city last night and then forcibly brought me here. Where? Here. Here in this grave. In what grave were you buried? I do not know who's buried in this grave. You were killed by two men and buried here. I'm not killed nor buried yet. I'm still alive like you, locked inside this tomb by two evil men who kidnapped me last night and tried to rape me. Where is this grave? I told you I am trapped inside this damning place. Would you please open the door for me and stop asking unnecessary questions? No human being can enter. No human being can enter this holy tomb and live except for the all disciple. The, the centennial of this blessed shrine of God's righteous guardian Makishabi. May Allah bless him and bless his soul. Please go and tell that holy centennial of God's shrine to come and open the door and lead me out of this damning grave. What is your name? I told you my name is Irshad Shambari. I'm a widowed woman from the Mujahideen camps in Gandhar city. So far, this conversation between the old hag woman and the white foreign woman has been interpreted by other women who happen to be still in the psychic state of hearing and understanding as a direct, heavenly, earthly telephone communication between the worlds of the living and the dead. But when the dead woman mentioned that her name was an earthly feminine name, not a heavenly one, the old hunchback and half-deaf wife of the village chief, who happened to be listening, trembling, and shaking, decided to share in this heavenly language. Who imprisoned your soul in this holy tomb, my late daughter Irshad, asked the village chief's wife in a hoarse voice like an old ogre. Two evil men abducted me last night and brought me to this grave and tried to undress me and then rape me together. I cannot touch the door of the holy shrine with my hands because I'm an aura woman lacking in brain and deficient in religion and reason. Nothing like this will happen to you if you do that. May God bless you and your family for saving me from this dark shrine. The Australian widow might have been left to starve and test in that ancient tomb and buried alive there if it had not been for another woman less religious and not so superstitious as the other villagers. So she stood on her feet and came out of her hiding place and walked slowly and fearfully toward the door and opened it quickly and ran away because she thought she had opened a heavenly door and unleashed a spiritual being. As soon as the door opened, the kidnapped, beautiful, white foreign woman who had been imprisoned in the dark tomb walked out, clutching a gun in her hand. Her white color and bewitching beauty made this Afghani village woman believe that she is a heavenly angel indeed, or a virgin nymph who descended from paradise. But the hair old woman who dared to break the seal of the sacred iron gate collapsed to the ground and fainted when she saw the miserable state of the blondie foreign woman with a gun in her hand ready to fire. Meanwhile, before the imprisoned, kidnapped white woman Irshad came out of that dark tomb, the teenage girls escaping from God's sacred mountain where the blessed shrine is located, began arriving in the village and bringing disturbing news. These runaway girls arrived at different times and entered the village from all four directions. Every girl thinks she's the only escapee and survivor. The distance between the village and the holy mountain is 30 minutes by donkey and 1 hour on foot. However, the fairest young female fugitive landed in the village after 15 minutes of non-stop flying, a record. The second runaway teenage damsel arrived after 20 minutes of driving at breakneck speed on wheels on her bare feet. The third underage girl arrived after 25 minutes of the woman's 100-meter race at the World Olympics in Afghanistan. This, of course, is one of the seven impossibilities for this competition to be held in a Muslim country. These three runaway girls reported the fatal accident differently according to their perceptions. The first girl reported that the holy shrine of the righteous saint was bombed by Muslim terrorists and killed all the women, and she alone managed to escape. A second girl believes that the good man of God has risen from his grave and shot the uncle village woman and killed them all, and she is the only survivor. The third girl claimed that the blessed mountain of God was struck by a lightning bolt from heaven, and that all the guilty women who went there for pilgrimage were killed except for her alone. In this way, the surviving young female escapees continued to come one by one, giving various reports and causing more fear and panic. In the meantime, the brave old lady took out the remains of the Australian widow from her grave after being buried in it for many hours. Irshad then attempts to revive the unconscious elderly woman who sets her free. She found a jar of water blessed there for the visiting female pilgrims. She took it and poured half of its water over the half-dead old woman before she could bring her back to life. The terrified village woman opened her eyes in extreme terror and mistook the white, blondie, blondie woman for one of the two angels of death, Munkar and Nikir, who are supposed, according to Islamic and sting him day and night until he rises from his grave naked and barefoot on the last day of resurrection. So the frightened old hag woman called out to the white blunt angel of days, "Please, angel of days, do not torment me. I will not torture or harm you. My gracious lady, I am so grateful to you for freeing me from this damning grave. Who are you, pure angel of Allah? Are you not one of the angels of death, Munkar and Nikir? I'm not an angel, I'm just a foreign woman from Australia. Are you a person like me? Yes, I'm a human like you. My name is Irshad Shambari. How did you enter the holy shrine tomb? Yesterday, in the middle of the night, two wicked men snatched me from the city and brought me here by force and on the back of a lame donkey, with my hands and feet bound by ropes and my mouth covered with a long turban, and imprisoned in this. They imprisoned me inside this dark tomb. The old Afghan woman was shocked when she realized that the white foreign girl Irshad had entered the holy sepulchre without any curse. Her family has made her believe since childhood that a woman who ventures into the holy sepulchre will contract leper- leprosy or worse than turn into an ugly monkey, a creepy zombie, or an unclean pig. But after she saw with her own eyes an unclean young Western woman who dared to enter into the holy sepulchre and come out alive, her faith in the man of God, the righteous, the dead, the old, the broken, the mighty, was severely shaken. She concluded that the entire holy mountain had been defiled by the presence of the cursed foreign woman inside the tomb. Even worse, the old woman saw that two evil men had had unlawful sex with her all night inside the holy sepulchre, fucking her pussy with two dicks simultaneously. Perhaps she would not have felt so much astonishment and righteous anger if she had heard that a girl and a boy had been caught naked in the very act of committing adultery in the prayer sanctuary of the village only mosque. As a result, the angry old hag woman fell on the holy ground, which had been discredited because two desolate men had defiled a pussy of an infidel woman with their cocks, and so she began to weep like a mother who had lost her child. Then she filled her head with holy sand and started slapping her cheeks like a mad woman. As for the other woman who had hidden all this time, had heard all the conversation between the white woman and their fellow angry pilgrim. They came out of their hiding places and joined the village woman in her weeping, wailing, and lamentation. Likewise, they all imitated the angry old hag woman and began crying, bewailing, squealing, beating their bodies, slapping their faces, and blacking their hair with their hands. They covered their heads with dirt and ashes too. They felt that their holy, righteous, and buried guardian of God on earth, whom they worshipped since childhood, and some of whom visited his sacred mountain from an early age, had died and become an evil man after his holy shrine was defied and discredited by an impure white woman. She defiled his pure and blessed shrine by her unlawful fornication with two evil men. Meanwhile, the so-called impure, adulterous white woman Irshad looks at this weeping Afghan woman and wonders what she should do. She does not know how to return to the city of Kandahar alone, where her 7 children are in the Mujahideen camps. Besides, the sun has set and it is already dark. She's afraid of risking her life again by going down the mountain top alone. She might be attacked by wild beasts, or some evil Afghani men would kidnap her and try to gang rape her again. Her only hope is to wait for this woman to overcome their deep sadness and overwhelming emotions and take her back with them. While she was waiting impatiently and thinking about what to do, Irshad was surprised by a strange reaction that she did not expect to happen to her at all. Suddenly, a fat woman ran up to her and assaulted her, not expecting or preparing for such a sudden, inexplicable attack. The blonde foreign woman fell upside down with her nakedness exposed and her small black underwear exposed when the fat woman slapped her and pushed her back with all her might. Let us kill this evil infidel white girl. The woman who initiated the attack shouted loudly and furiously. The other woman immediately responded and ran towards the white woman. Having no choice, the armed Australian foreign woman had to fire a shot in the air from her still wielding rifle. The sound of the powerful shot causes some of the women to fall and others to stop. Ershad immediately got to her feet and faced him. What did I do wrong? The white foreign woman angrily shouted. You damning white demon and impure infidel foreign whore Christian, shouted the old woman who started the attack. You had sex and fornication with two corrupt men inside the Brescia, the Vincent of the Holy Sepulchre of God's good guardian, Makishabi, Jabbar al Maksura, who used to follow us and help us. I didn't do anything like that. I told you that I was kidnapped by two men from the city and brought against my will to this place and locked inside. And of course, the two men gang raped you inside our sacred shrine. Yes, they tried to rape me, but God saved me from them. I scared them with my gun and made them run off like cowards. If you are telling the truth, why didn't you kill at least one of them and show us his dead body now? I wanted to kill them both, but they locked me inside and ran off like terrified dogs. The hunchbacked, ailing old wife of the village head said, there is no point to arguing with this foreign white Christian infidel woman. We must take her to the village and bring the matter to my blessed husband. Some angry village woman objected to this opinion and said that the impure Christian infidel, white witch, and filthy bitch would bring many curses to their blessed village if they took her there. Her unholy existence and presence will spread prostitution, fornication, immorality, like the spread of coronavirus among all the teenage girls and young women of the village who are not yet married and still virgins and looking for men to marry them. However, the same haggard wife of the village headman exercised her veto power and convinced several objecting village women of her wife's decision. In the end, the extremely angry woman accepted the village chief's wife's good advice. Then they took with them the beautiful blonde white young woman who had been freed from the den of adulterers and the sepulchre of the dead bones of the unknown Muslim soldier of Allah who got killed as a terrorist martyr in the cause of jihad war against the Russian army many years ago.